5 years ago, rioters stormed the U.S. Capitol, beat police officers, and attempted to occupy the building, all over pure political fiction. We remember. New developments in Venezuela, Greenland, and Ukraine as the White House foreign policy portfolio expands in dramatic and, to some, dizzying ways. Venezuelans and Cubans have deep roots in Miami. What do they make of this moment and its possibilities? We will ask Miami's brand new mayor, Eileen Higgins. Hello, everyone. I'm Major Garrett in Washington. Let me welcome you to the Takeout. Facts are stubborn things, and whatever may be our wishes, our inclinations, or the dictates of our passions, they cannot alter the state of facts and evidence. Future founding father and the second president of the United States, John Adams, said that in 1770 as defense counsel to British soldiers accused of murder in what has come to be known as the Boston Massacre. Adams's motives and his successful defense of those British soldiers is not what is on our mind today, which marks 5 years precisely since rioters stormed the U.S. Capitol to violently block certification of the 2020 presidential election. Now, Adams's words remind us that wishes, inclinations, and passions tremble and wither before stubborn facts. Always have, always will. One can, of course, cling to wishes, inclinations, and passions, but one cannot surmount the obstacle of immovable, hardened facts, such as these. The 2020 presidential election was tested in court dozens of times. Recounts confirmed it in all relevant jurisdictions, in some cases more than once. Those who assailed that election and then were sued subsequently over their reckless allegations have lost in court over and over and over. Those who committed violence against the peaceful transfer of power were convicted or pled guilty. That they were subsequently pardoned cleansed their criminal record, but did not erase the facts of their offenses. President Trump was indicted for his role in the Capitol riot, and as this new year dawned, literally on New Year's Eve, the House Judiciary Committee, led by Republicans, released a video interview with Jack Smith, the prosecutor who brought the case.
There is no historical analog for what President Trump did in this case. As we said in the indictment, he was free to say that he thought he won the election. He was even free to say falsely that he won the election. One of the strengths of our case and why we felt we had such strong proof is our witnesses were not going to be political enemies of the president. They were going to be political allies. We had numerous witnesses who would say, I voted for President Trump. I campaigned for President Trump. I wanted him to win. The Speaker of the House in Arizona, the Speaker of the House in Michigan. We had an elector in Pennsylvania who is a former congressman who is going to be an elector for President Trump, who said that what they were trying to do was an attempt to overthrow the government and illegal.
Among the facts most stubborn about this day 5 years ago, it was an attempt to overthrow an election. That attempt was illegal. It was a crime against this constitutional republic, one that our wishes, our inclinations, or the dictates of our passions cannot alter, diminish, or whitewash. We begin tonight with Scott MacFarlane. Scott, what was it like on Capitol Hill today? Walk us through some of the things that went down.
A remarkably depressing day for everybody at the Capitol, the staff and the members who were there, and I can explain why. This is one of those things which consumed half of the Congress today. The Republicans in the U.S. House were not on the grounds today. They were at the Kennedy Center with the president. So the House was in half recess and half was there. The Democrats were there. They staged a hearing as best they can in the one room they're allowed to with some of the victims, the police victims, the witnesses, the members of Congress who were hiding and evacuating that day, recounting not just the horrors of the day, but the ongoing threat to democracy and the ongoing threat of the pardons of the 1,500 plus January 6 defendants. It was one voice today on Capitol Hill talking about January 6th, with just one exception. Republicans didn't mention it, didn't talk about it, didn't commemorate it. So you have what is clearly major, an ongoing toxicity, divide, and politicization of January 6th, which at the time when we saw it in real time, we thought would be impossible 5 years later.
I want to play for our audience some sound from that hearing that you mentioned, kind of an ad hoc hearing organized by Democrats in the one room that they're allowed to do that. First voice you'll hear, former Speaker of the House, now Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi, and former Republican Congressman from Illinois, Adam Kinzinger. Let's watch.
For over 3 hours, we begged him to send the National Guard. He never did it. He took joy in not doing it.
I get asked frequently, why are you still going on about January 6th? Can't you just let it go? If our country had achieved real accountability and deterrence, we could move on.
Once I got away from the mega cult and started educating myself about January the 6th, I knew what I did was wrong.
That last voice, Pamela Hemphill, who's been on this program, talking about her transition from someone who doubted that election, showed up on that day on January 6th, and then subsequently renounced those previous beliefs and found herself victim to what she just described in that hearing as a cultish obsession with denialism about the 2020 election.
Adam Kinzinger made a point that I think it was echoed several different ways. Several different people did so today. Why don't you just let it go? In fact, Republican Senator Jim Justice was on the floor of the Senate saying just that today. Let it go. Let's move on. That, I think, misinterprets the situation. January 6th is a kinetic story, an ongoing story with new chapters to be written about how it has further divided Americans, further inflamed U.S. politics. The denialism of it re-traumatizes the victims and also questions the stability of the next election.
And hard to let it go, Scott, when there's a plaque that a federal law says should be erected on the U.S. Capitol to mark that day, and it's still not there.
Yeah, the Speaker of the House, after a couple of years of silence on this, finally explained why he's not going to hang it. He says it's not a lawful plaque. He says the statute under which it was devised requires every police officer to be named, not just the police departments. That's not tenable. There were like 3,000 police officers, some of whom don't want their names out there. Tom Tillis, the Republican from North Carolina, the one who spoke up in defiance about the pardons from January 6th today, says he might try to bridge a gap here and get this thing approved now.
From North Carolina, Senator Tom Tillis. We'll keep an eye on that. Scott McFarland, as always. Thank you very much, sir. Former Georgia Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan testified at today's January 6th Capitol riot hearing that Scott just referred to. Republican, now he's turned to a Democrat, is running to be the state's next governor. He spoke to me earlier today. Let's watch. Today feels like a partisan exercise. The Democrats want to remember 5 years ago today, the Capitol riot. Republicans don't. It seems to me that is part of your own journey politically, Jeff Duncan.
Yeah, the unfortunate part about today is, only Democrats seem to want to recognize how close we came to breaking the back of democracy on January 6th, 2021. The pressure campaign put on by Donald Trump and those around him certainly was unbelievable, and it really pushed us to the edge. But thank goodness enough people and enough safeguards were in place to allow us to continue to move forward as a country. But yeah, my political journey has been happening for years. I just grew disgusted of Republicans making excuses to solving people's problems. And I wake up as a proud Democrat each and every day now with this improved toolkit that's able to serve the needs of not only Georgians that are voters, but Georgians that need help, that need somebody to meet them in that emergency room when they don't have health insurance, or meet them in that grocery checkout line when they don't have the money or can't afford childcare. As a Democrat, I can answer those questions for them much easier than as a Republican.
Jeff, I'll get into that race and your bid for the Democratic nomination for governor in a second, but how do you personally and how do you politically assess the verdict of history? Because you have the law and the facts about what happened on January 6th, but then you have the retort from the president, hey, I won re-election, so it couldn't have mattered that much.
Yeah, I think you just got to play the long game with history, and the long game is just continuing to tell the truth. That's why I'm here today in the U.S. Capitol. I'm telling the truth in front of the January 6th committee, answering their questions and making sure that the annals of history recognize what really happened. And that was not an attempt to validate an election by Donald Trump in 2020. It was an all-out conspiracy, or a conspired attempt to overthrow democracy. It was organized, and it was intentional. And the lies and the conspiracy theories almost flipped the tables.
So how do you assess your run for the Democratic nomination for governor? You're I know there's not a lot of polling. You're just recently in the race, comparatively. But you're up against former mayor of Atlanta, Keisha Lance Bottoms. How do you persuade skeptical, legitimately skeptical Georgians that as a lifelong Republican, you are a reliable new Democrat?
Yeah, some of the skeptics will ask me, Jeff, have you lost your mind? And my answer is no, I found my heart. I'm a Democrat, a proud Democrat now that doesn't have to make excuses for Donald Trump or the failed Republican policies. I can talk about Medicaid expansion. I can talk about improving public education. I can do the things that Georgians want us to do. And here's the sense I get from Democrats all across the state. They're ready to win. It's been nearly 30 years since the Democrats won the governorship in Georgia, and that catches most people off guard. And it's a very simple math equation. It's because they haven't gotten enough votes. I'm the only person in this race that can get Democrats, independents, and this batch of growing, disgusted Republicans to show up and vote for us in November of 26 and not let Donald Trump be the de facto governor, because that's what will happen. If a Republican becomes governor, and most likely that's going to be Burt Jones as the nominee, then Donald Trump becomes the governor. And we know what that looks like. We know that Linda McMahon comes in and runs our public schools. Our budget turns into Project 2025. National Guard troops are on the streets of Atlanta. That's how stark the difference is between me and the Republicans.
How do you assess, Jeff Duncan, where you are and where Marjorie Taylor Greene have found themselves in relationship to President Trump?
Well, certainly, Marjorie Taylor Greene has drank more MAGA juice than probably anybody in the state of Georgia, and to see her complete turnaround is something, inspiring, jaw-dropping, you name it. There's not a big enough adjective for it. But, I think we're all on our journeys. I think Marjorie Taylor Greene's situation speaks to the crisis that's inside the Republican Party right now all around the country. Republicans can't make it, they can't even explain Donald Trump. Give a Republican a six-pack in 2 hours, and they still can't explain why tariffs make sense. Nobody can explain any of these actions, any of these weaponizing the Department of Justice. It just doesn't make sense, and that's the crisis inside the Republican Party. And that's the opportunity for Democrats right now all over the country, especially in Georgia. If we can wake up to this opportunity to open the tent and let more folks in that are moderate Republicans, independents, give them a place to call home, we'll not only win elections for a cycle, we'll win elections for a generation.
What did Democrats get wrong in Georgia? What have they gotten wrong? And what would you teach them to get right if you become successful?
I think it's important for Democrats to stay focused. My campaign has really been laser focused on three things. The three things, quite honestly, a majority of Georgians are concerned about every morning when they wake up. The affordability crisis, the healthcare crisis, and the Donald Trump crisis. Those are real. As I mentioned a minute ago, even Republicans can't explain Donald Trump. But this healthcare crisis, millions of folks in Georgia are waking up not knowing what they're going to do for health insurance, either staying at home, not getting their medical issues treated, or going into the emergency room and bankrupting themselves. And the affordability crisis, housing, childcare, groceries, you name it, it's a crisis. And meanwhile, Donald Trump is paying attention to everybody in the world but his own citizens.
Pretend I'm a constituent or a potential constituent in Georgia, and I say to you, you know what, Jeff, you're interesting, you're somewhat appealing, but I really care about abortion rights, and you've been diametrically opposed to what I care about almost your entire political career. And I don't accept that you've turned over a new leaf on that. You better persuade me otherwise.
Well, I appreciate the perspective, and I certainly have to share my heart. And this has been a journey for me, one that Kamala Harris actually helped me be on. She explained that it wasn't just because somebody has a personal belief doesn't give us the inherent right to push that on other people. And she was exactly right. And so as governor day one, I'll sign an executive order that clarifies doctors can practice medicine on women without the fear of prosecution, and also introduce legislation to repeal the 6-week ban, because that's what millions of women want, and that's what they need. It's important for women to make that decision with their doctors, with their families, with their faith, with themselves. And for me, I've taken the time to listen to these horrific stories, these difficult medical situations, these difficult personal scenarios that play out, and I know that women absolutely do deserve the right to choose.
Former Georgia Lieutenant Governor, now Democrat, Jeff Duncan, I appreciate the time, sir. Thank you.
Thanks.
The White House has its eyes on numerous international issues, chief among them Venezuela, but there's also news tonight about the administration's ambitions for Greenland. For insight, we turn, as always, or frequently, to senior White House correspondent and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe. Ed, what's the latest?
Major, with the focus on Venezuela and questions about what exactly the United States is going to do there, next. The White House today reiterating or making clear the president is quite serious about his ambitions in Greenland, saying this afternoon that U.S. military action to take Greenland is not off the table, but that there are also discussions about possibly acquiring the territory that is part of the Kingdom of Denmark, or setting up some kind of free association that would allow for much more U.S. involvement and presence there in that part of the world. This, of course, remains a big concern of the president's and his administration when it comes to the broader issue of security for the Arctic at a time when China and Russia are using shipping lanes, especially to the north of Greenland, in a way that worries the United States and is part of the reason why the president continues to push for it. But, of course, this began before he even became president last year, and everyone kind of started to laugh it off. He was asked again about it in recent days in the wake of the extraction of Nicolas Maduro, and the president made clear he's still quite serious about this. It was reiterated by one of his top aides, Stephen Miller, in an interview last night.
Is there a timeline,
The United
Ed?
States should have Greenland as part of the United States. There's no need to even think or talk about this in the context that you're asking of a military operation. Nobody's going to fight the United States militarily over the future of Greenland.
I think there are some European powers that would beg to differ. A pretty remarkable joint statement today from the leaders of Denmark, France, Germany, Italy, Poland, Spain, and the United Kingdom, reiterating that Greenland's future is to be determined by the people of Greenland and Denmark, and that they said they share the United States' mutual concerns about security in the Arctic, but that it should be done cooperatively and through NATO. Major.
Ed, is there a timeline that the administration has outlined for this gambit?
All that Caroline Leavitt, the press secretary, would tell us this afternoon is that the president wants this done before the end of his term.
Ed O'Keefe of the White House, thank you very much. In Venezuela, officials there said at least 24 security personnel died in the U.S. raid that captured Nicolas Maduro and his wife. This, in addition to the 32 Cuban personnel that government said died as part of Maduro's security detail. There were reports today of arrests of journalists inside Venezuela, then reports that those journalists were released. The situation there remains tense. As well, it's tense in neighboring Colombia, which is where we find our Lilia Luciano. Lilia, what's the latest?
Hey there, Major. I've been talking to people for the last couple of days here on the crossing. We're right at the crossing between Venezuela and Colombia. And, Colombians have their opinions. They say what they wish. Venezuelans who live in Colombia say, we have free speech. This is what I think. The vast majority of people we've approached who are Venezuelan, and even including some who live here in Colombia that we see and we talk to coming out of Venezuela, do not want to speak at all about what is happening in Venezuela unless they are supporting the Maduro regime. There's been a lot of expressions of, you just heard him, actually. I have my noise-canceling headphones, but I slightly heard que viva Maduro, long live Maduro. I hear a lot of free Maduro. The people who are against Maduro, pretty quiet. Why is that? Because a lot of people who come into Colombia also go back to Venezuela, and the repression is as bad as it has been over months and years. We have been getting reports from what are called the colectivos. These are the armed by the state, by the way, militias or gangs that operate in different cities of Venezuela, especially in Caracas, and who intimidate people. The police, the armed forces are also part of the repression, making sure that anybody who expresses their support for what happened on Saturday, for the removal of Maduro, for the bombings, for the United States, faces possible arrest.
To that point about formal and informal means of intimidation inside Venezuela, I want to bring you, Lilia, and our audience, a new exclusive CBS Evening News interview conducted by our colleague Tony DeCopel, who spoke with Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado. Here is part of their conversation.
The deputy of Maduro, a vice president of his, Delcy Rodriguez, is now the interim president. She is in charge. Some people in the U.S. say she's a moderate, that she's going to cooperate with the U.S. What do you think? Do you think she's the right person to lead Venezuela right now?
Everybody in Venezuela and abroad knows perfectly who she is and the role she has played. She was sanctioned by the United States government because of the corruption and all the involvement she has in criminal activities. Beyond that, She has been the architect, one of the main architects and director of the torture centers in Venezuela, of repression towards our innocent people. And the main link, the main actor that has relations with Russia, with Iran, and other countries that have, obscure and criminal activities in Venezuela. So certainly she's nothing but like a moderate. I think it's evident the United States has instructed her to take certain actions regarding further dismantling of the criminal structure as a path forward towards a complete transition to democracy in Venezuela.
It sounds like you're saying she's done a lot of bad in the past, but now she is a puppet of the United States.
Well, I will not speculate once again. I think she is in a very critical position because nobody trusts her. Nobody.
Lilia, you were very dialed in that region and have experience inside Venezuela. What do you make of what you just heard?
Well, Major, I've been very dialed into this campaign. I interviewed Maria Corina Machado when she was illegally banned from running in the election. I was there with her when Maduro declared victory, also illegally and fraudulently. And I interviewed Maria Corina the day that she was announced as the Nobel Peace Prize winner. And this woman has been through it all. She knows exactly the capacity of intimidation, of repression, that the regime of Venezuela can instill on the people. Something that really caught my attention there was in Tony's question, actually, the idea that Delcy, he thought, well, are you saying that she's a puppet of the United States? That's such an interesting term because it seems to me that the reason why Delcy is there is to send the message to the Venezuelan people that it is not a puppet of the United States who's going to run the country. The people of Venezuela, not the people who voted for Edmundo González Urrutia, not the people who have supported Machado, not the people who want to be free of the regime, but the people who still follow the regime are not trusting of Maria Corina Machado precisely because of the rhetoric that is coming from the regime, precisely because of the messaging that Diosdado and others and Maduro himself have sent, saying that if Maria Corina were to leave the country, she would be the puppet of the United States. So I just thought that was very interesting, and perhaps that is why the U.S. is deciding on this different strategy, a strategy of continuation over the collapse of the regime and the chaos that could follow, and play that long road into a transition to democracy, hopefully for Maria Corina, the opposition, and the people who want to get rid of the regime.
Lily Luciano, thank you so much for that context and all your excellent reporting. You can see more of Tony Dokoupil's interview with Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado tonight on the CBS Evening News from Miami. It airs at 6:30 Eastern on your local CBS station. Miami has the largest population of Venezuelan expats, and many are celebrating the capture of Nicolas Maduro. Next on the Takeout, the city's new mayor, Eileen Higgins, joins me with more on her call to protect Venezuelan residents who have built lives in that city. Plus, the U.S. Marine veteran who spent years detained in a Venezuelan prison, his reaction to the capture of Maduro. And also, there's another contender in the already very crowded race to replace New York Democratic Congressman Jerry Nadler. Longtime Trump foe George Conway has launched a bid in New York's 12th district. Our political panel will weigh in on that. The Takeout returns in 90 seconds. Welcome back to the Takeout. There is no American city for which the events in Venezuela and their possible implications for that country, as well as Cuba, resonate more than in Miami. The city is home to the largest concentration of Venezuelan immigrants in America, and the Cuban diaspora first called Miami home, and much of it still does. In fact, every year on New Year's, since 1959, Cuban exiles in Miami have roasted pigs and toasted "next year in Havana," their dream of a post-Castro, post-communist Cuba. Quick historical quirk. In Washington, D.C., there is a statue to the great liberator, Simón Bolívar of Venezuela, near the Interior Department. It was given to the U.S. by Venezuela as a gift of friendship in what year? 1959. With this as a backdrop, let me bring in the newly minted mayor of Miami, Eileen Higgins. Mayor Higgins, it's great to have you on the program. Talk to me about what your city has experienced and what its dreams are, both in Venezuela and in some respects Cuba after the capture of Nicolas Maduro.
Well, certainly here in our community, we want democracy returned to Venezuela, and people here have been waiting decades for a moment of hope. And of course, the removal of Maduro provides a little of that. But what you and your team have been reporting is what we are hearing as well, is that Venezuela remains in chaos. The colectivos are still out on the streets patrolling and terrorizing people and making them nervous. So the situation is very unclear and will remain unclear, in my opinion, for the weeks to come. So our community, we've got a lot of joy, but also a lot of nervousness about what's next. And as you know, Florida is the home to the largest percentage of Venezuelans in America, and they're nervous. And basically, 500,000 Venezuelans here lost their temporary protected status in November. Half of those are in Florida, and they need that status back. Venezuela is not safe to return to.
So dig into that a little bit more, Madam Mayor. The Trump administration has said that temporary protected status is removed. Recently, the Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem, has said, well, Venezuelans can apply for asylum. Is that a proper or equivalent option?
The asylum process is a permanent process. It's also very complicated. It takes a long time, requires a whole new set of paperwork, a whole new set of lawyers, and extremely costly. In the meantime, basically with a switch of the computer in November, they got rid of TPS for these folks. They could just hit the button again and get these folks back under TPS while they're looking to perhaps have a permanent status or stability, please, happens in Venezuela should they choose to return. But going back now for many of these families would be foolish, would be unsafe. Political prisoners have still not been released. If TPS is restored tomorrow, we have tens of thousands of people, breadwinners, who could go back to work. I know of companies, large and small, that still have openings. They received a letter in November asking them to fire everybody that had lost their TPS status because they were Venezuelan. Many of those jobs are still open. Those families don't have a breadwinner. It's good for their safety, and quite frankly, it's good for Miami's economy to have them back working.
Madam Mayor, what do you think might happen in the not-too-distant future in Cuba? Mario Diaz-Balart was on my program last night saying he doesn't believe the regime there is going to last much longer.
Well, certainly that is our hope. Cuba is just in a terrible state of affairs. Electricity is random, if at all. Healthcare is bad. Groceries are in short supply. And of course, nobody has any freedom. So our community, every day, we think about the day when we will have a free Cuba, where so many of our residents still have family members, can return to, feel safe in. And quite frankly, let's get them a flourishing economy as well. I certainly hope the Cuban regime, those folks there, figure out that the time for a prosperous and free Cuba is long past, and they should start down that road now.
Mary Higgins, back to the Venezuelans in your community. Are they recent arrivals, or do many of them, or most of them, have long-standing roots in Miami?
So the folks under temporary protected status have been here for a number of years. Venezuela has been in chaos since Chavez took over, and then we've had years of Maduro. Many of them are small business owners. Their moms, their dads, they have American citizen children. They're the breadwinners. So we have a range of people that are here under TPS, although no longer. And so for me, that is my plea to President Trump, is to restore TPS now. Let's get these folks feeling safe, feeling secure while we are watching what is going on in Venezuela. When Venezuela is safe to return to, they can choose to return. But for now, it's not safe. You've seen the reporting. You wouldn't want to be moving back there today, and I wouldn't either, certainly not with a family full of children.
Mayor of Miami, Eileen Higgins. Madam Mayor, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Former U.S. Marine who was imprisoned in Venezuela under President Nicolas Maduro's rule talks about his time in captivity and the leader's capture, meaning Maduro's recent capture, plus what he thinks ought to happen to Americans still being held in Venezuela. I bet you know the answer. We'll get more on that when we come back. That's next on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. The Venezuelan government has a history of detaining Americans, often labeling them as spies or plotters of coups against the government. United States Marine veteran Matthew Heath spent 2 years imprisoned in Venezuela. Heath was arrested in September 2020 after the Venezuelan government accused him of acting as a terrorist and a spy for President Trump. He was freed as part of a prisoner exchange later. Matthew Heath joins me now. Matthew, thank you for your time. Briefly explain what happened to you and how it was that you came to be freed from your Venezuelan captivity.
Oh, Major, thank you for having me on. Well, I'm one of the more than 44 Americans that were detained under Nicolas Maduro's regime, wrongfully detained in Venezuela. Nicolas Maduro wrongfully detains Americans to use as trading chips as a policy tool. I was released along with 6 other Americans for the trade of his 2 nephews who had been convicted for narco trafficking several hundred kilos of cocaine into the United States.
When you were in Venezuela, what were you doing and how did this arrest go down?
Well, like many Americans, I was just simply traveling through. I was stopped at a normal checkpoint. I was in a taxi. They asked to see my passport. I showed them my American passport, and I was immediately detained. I was taken by the military counterintelligence of Venezuela, and I was placed in their holding facility. It's called Casa de los Sueños, the House of Dreams. I can assure you that it does not live up to its name. It's a facility that there are 5 Americans that are still being held in Caracas tonight, and they're under terrible treatment. Everything that you can imagine. There's torture. There's not access to clean drinking water, medical facilities. They're under very brutal treatment down there.
You were abused while you were in captivity, Matthew?
Well, by any definition of the word, I was tortured. I'll tell you one of them. They handcuffed me to the frame of a metal bed and electrocuted me with a car battery jumper cables. It's not exactly a polite conversation, but I can tell you that that's just the tip of the iceberg. And unfortunately, the DHC, the Venezuelan counterintelligence, is known for this kind of ridiculous, sadistic treatment for no purpose. And unfortunately, like I said, those 5 Americans down there, I want to call on President Rodriguez to release them immediately.
Should that be something that President Trump should call for publicly in order to assess what this new regime in Venezuela might or might not be?
Well, the purpose for him to call for it publicly would probably help the morale of the family members. However, I think that he should get on the phone tonight, call Delcy Rodriguez and say that he's sending a plane down there and that he'd like them loaded on that plane immediately. I think that we've still got time to get them home tonight.
Matthew, based on your experience, which you just summarized, do you believe those Americans in captivity now are in worse shape, potentially, than you were because of hostility that would come from the regime following the events of the weekend?
Well, I can say that no Americans have died in captivity in Venezuela. They understand that American lives can be used as trading chips for policy goals. That being said, their treatment's absolutely terrible. All Americans are kept in torturous conditions, violations of all their human rights. And yes, I would say that the situation in Venezuela is an elevated risk level for them and any other Americans that are, please do not travel to Venezuela.
And based on your experience and your perspective, Matthew, how do you evaluate the events of the last 72 hours? Not only the capture of Nicolas Maduro and his wife Celia, but the remaining members of the regime still in power and seeking a way to negotiate them, at least for some period of time, remaining in power.
Well, personally, I'm thrilled, like millions of Venezuelans, that Nicolas Maduro is finally going to face justice. He's going to have a fair trial, a trial that's much fairer than any trial that's held in Venezuela. However, I think that I'm going to give the Trump administration a little bit of rope here. I think that when Ambassador Bremer dismissed the entire Iraqi security services, the military, the police in Iraq in 2003, that turned out to be a total disaster. And I'm hopeful that since we've still got Pedrino Lopez in charge of the military in Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez in charge of the executive, Diosdado Cabello in charge of the legislative, I'd like to see a peaceful transfer of power. I'd like to see elections called in the next 30 to 60 days and let the Venezuelans choose who their next leader is going to be.
Matthew Heath, I appreciate your time. I'm sorry for what you suffered, but I do appreciate you letting my audience know what it was like and what your perspective is on the days ahead. I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Garrett, could I leave one last thought?
Sure, you can call me Major, too.
Major Garrett, I'd like to call on the Trump administration to charge Nicolas Maduro with 44 counts of kidnapping. Thank you very much.
They watched the program. I'm sure they've just heard you. Matthew Heath, thank you very much. Switching parties and home states to run for Congress. Some people do it. Well, how about longtime Trump critic George Conway? He's trying to find his way through a very packed Democratic field in a race for Congress in Midtown Manhattan. We're going to evaluate his chances, such as they are, next with our political panel right here on The Takeout. Welcome back to The Takeout. The man once married to longtime Trump advisor Kellyanne Conway has launched a congressional campaign in New York's 12th district as a Democrat. Here is some of George Conway's pitch.
We have a corrupt president, a mendacious president, a criminal president whose masked agents are disappearing people from our streets, who's breaking international law, and he's running our federal government like a mob protection racket.
I'll bring in our political panel. We're going to have two segments with our political panel today, so isn't that exciting? Republican strategist Lance Trover worked on Doug Burgum's presidential campaign, and John McCarthy served as a senior advisor in the Biden White House. So, George Conway, the 10th Democrat entering the primary. 10. We've had several on this program, and I'm sure we're going to get all 10 on this program, but we'll try to get Conway on to see what he thinks. Lance, what do you think of this?
Godspeed, George. Go for it, man. Hey, look, but what I read today in the New York Times is that he won't bend the knee in Mamdani. He doesn't want to cater to the socialist wing of the Democratic Party, and he claims to be pro-Israel. Well, I don't know if he's checked in with the proclivities of the Democratic Party lately, particularly in New York City, but those are things that you kind of got to do if you want to win in New York these days. So, anyway, Godspeed. Go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this says probably more about the Republican Party's kind of realignment in the last few years. I mean, George Conway is a lifelong conservative, is someone who in the first Trump administration, was an outside critic and is now running as a Democrat in a congressional primary. So, I mean, I think Democrats have an opportunity.
Super long shot.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that. I mean, it's a crowded primary. It's anyone's game in many ways.
20%, yeah.
And I mean,
maybe
one of the advantages he'll have is name ID and the ability to probably turn out new voters. That's something that a lot of those other people won't have.
Sure, and he'll be able to raise money too. I'm confident in that. He seems to be able to do that. So again, he could win for sure.
You think so?
Well, in a crowded primary, to John's point, yes.
He's also got huge name recognition, deep pockets,
absolutely.
and the other things.
Anything's possible. But if he's not going to cater to the far left of the party, I have a hard time believing that's the problem he's going to have is if he won't cater to the socialists and the Mamdani wing of the party in New York City, I think that's going to be a struggle for him.
Yeah, but I mean, those districts are small and tight, and I mean, local politics still matters. I mean, you have very serious local candidates there who could really break through, too.
John, you were in the Biden White House. Obviously, there was a lot of thought given, off and on, to Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela. Are Democrats having a hard time messaging what's going on and what they think the Trump administration has set in motion in Venezuela?
I don't know that it's a tough issue for Democrats when it comes to messaging. I think they can kind of sit back and let this play out because I think the Republican Party and President Trump don't have a plan for themselves. I mean, each administration official seem like there was another conversation that happened that the president was or was not a part of. There's no clear, coherent message. Democrats, I think, just need to let the administration play this one out.
But the White House is portraying Democrats as calling this illegal, as basically siding with a narco-terrorist. Is that a messaging problem?
Well, I mean, I think that one thing that both parties should be able to agree on is that this was an incredible military operation. I mean, it is a testament to the U.S. military. I mean, that's a safe place for both parties to be able to talk about. But, I mean...
And the flimsiness of Cuban intelligence and Russian aerial defense systems and the like. So lots of things were learned.
Yeah. But I mean, Donald Trump has basically brought the same volatility that he has to the economy now to foreign affairs. So, I mean, at every single day, it seems like there's some new direction of U.S. foreign policy.
I think the problem the Democrats have is I don't think everyday average Americans, when it comes to foreign policies, get caught up in these academic discussions about, well,
what do they get caught up in?
They see decisive action and going and take out a narco-terrorist and hold him accountable in New York City.
Does the MAGA movement agree or disagree with Marjorie Taylor Greene, who says this is regime change? Marjorie Taylor Greene, who says this is regime change and not part of what America First is all about.
The last polling I've seen from the president, both internally and externally, has a 90% approval rating among Republicans. That hasn't
on this
changed.
issue.
Overall, I mean, the Republican Party is with the president. If you're not aligned with his priorities and you're becoming a roadblock to his priorities, well, again, I say who, because she's going to be not a member of Congress after today.
The Republican Party is with the president because they have to be, and they're afraid for their own seats. I mean, Republicans in Congress have given up their responsibility as a co-equal branch of government. Behind closed doors, Republicans in Congress would tell you a totally different story. They have some of these same concerns about congressional, oversight and the fact that the administration's overreaching.
Very quickly, before we go to break, and it's a commercial break, but it'll also probably be a candy break, just for your edification. Greenland. Yeah. The president seems intensely interested in the future of Greenland, even not ruling out military action to take it.
Well, historically, I mean, this goes back to the Truman administration, and our interest in Greenland dates back decades. I mean, so this is not new for the president of the United States. And look, I think it's an important country.
What is new is the idea that military action to take.
Well, look, I mean, he's certainly talking tough right now, but I think he's saying to the folks in Denmark, like, look, we need to work together to get something done.
They need some candy. We need to go to a commercial break. John McCarthy, Lance Trevor will stay with me. Come back for that. Welcome back to Takeout. Political panel, segment 2. We rarely get a chance to do that. We're delighted to have Lance Trover, Republican, John McCarthy, Democrat. This week in the House, if the schedule keeps, there'll be a vote on the discharge petition on a 3-year extension of expiring Obamacare extended tax credits. Evaluate that for me, John.
I mean, I think Republicans need to answer for this. I mean, they were the ones.
It's going to pass the House.
They were the ones who allowed us to get to this point in the first place. And if you step back even kind of a second, we went through the holidays and went over that cliff because Republicans didn't take action on that.
Right, because premiums are due to increase as a result of these expired.
Hold on. How did we get to this place? The Democrats passed the subsidies and set the expiration date. That's how we got to this place. It's not because of Republicans.
But Lance, you know the Republican strategy on tax cuts. You pass a tax cut with an expiration date, and if Democrats don't vote to extend it, they're voting for a tax increase. It goes both ways. You know that.
And if we're going to talk about
I got you, but he's saying the whole reason.
15 years to also come up with an alternative.
Look, I'm very, very open about this. I think Republicans need
It's going to pass the House. It's going to force some sort of resolution in the Senate, don't you believe?
And yes, I do.
And the White House is going to have to get engaged eventually.
Agreed. Look, I've been very public about this time and again. I think this is an issue Republicans need to deal with. I think it's unfortunate that we are in this situation because the Democrats put us here, and these are just flat-out giveaways to insurance companies. But politically, if you're asking me as a political operative, I think this is something Republicans need to take seriously and deal with.
John, you're going to get the last word.
Well, I would say I think that Republicans should take this seriously because right now, overwhelmingly, polls show that they're not trusted on the economy, which has historically been the place that Republicans have always done their best. So that's going to be a real problem for them when they hit the midterms.
And very quickly, John, Democrats are going to have to back off 3 years exactly as they are, but they'll accept something less than that.
I think that leadership has indicated that they'd be open to negotiating in good faith since the very beginning.
And Republicans are going to have to come around on that
I think they
next
should.
week or two, if not sooner. Yeah. Lance Trover, John McCarthy, it's been a pleasure. 2 segments. You get even more candy than the one segment ones. Happy Tuesday, everyone. You know who this is? It's the Takeout. And you know what we are. Relentlessly curious, reliably civil, occasionally clever. The Daily Report, coming up next.